Welcome to the latest edition of Russia Unmasked from the Center for Russian Studies in Kiev, in which we challenge the propaganda published by the Kremlin and others against Ukraine and share with you a Ukrainian perspective. Apologies for the voice this morning, bit of a cold, I think. My name is Tony Meehan. I'm based in London. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has been going on for more than 1,380 days. There is an estimated 1.2 million Russian military dead or wounded. The thoughts from Ukraine to Ukrainians is to survive, endure and prevail. It's been a different and interesting week in the propaganda wars across Europe and North America. This week's propaganda wars focuses on the three different attacks by the United States, surprisingly, on Ukraine and also Europe. Trump believes that Ukraine should hold presidential elections. Hijacked by Russian disinformation, the US president comes out as Putin's propaganda manager again. His recent pronouncements include 10 statements across a 10-day period, which appear to be based on Russian briefings. They illustrate a lack of understanding or empathy towards the independent state of Ukraine, allegedly an ally, being attacked by a neighbouring state led by a known military aggressor, Vladimir Putin. A thought for you. We know Russia's western borders are in part with Ukraine. Its northeastern border is with Alaska. If I may pose the following question, what would the United States' response be if Russia invaded Alaska? Are we to believe, in search of peace, the US would simply withdraw and cede Alaska to Russia? I doubt it. Why is it appropriate, therefore, for the United States to propose Ukraine concedes defeat and offers 20% of its territory to the same warmonger, Mr. Putin? Yes. If we reflect on history briefly, the current President of the United States has offered three options. Accept my proposal. If not, I will introduce untruths, exaggerations, and lay unacceptable pressure on you. Failing which, I will abandon you, the victim, to its fate, blaming others for his failure to achieve his interpretation of success, always reminding any audience he had been in control, the war would never have happened. It's a shame, really, isn't it? Ask yourself the question, who benefits from the following statements, all of which are questionable, if not untrue? Calling for presidential elections in Ukraine during wartime. Ukraine cannot win because Russia has the advantage. Accept defeat and give Russia control of Donbass. Zelensky hasn't read my peace plan. As President of the United States, I gave Ukraine nothing. NATO paid full price for weapons. Russia holds a stronger negotiating position. The situation in Ukraine gets to a point when it is not a democracy anymore. One has to ask, is there a democracy in Russia? Or in the United States, who controls the Supreme Courts and attacks political opponents in the same courts? Long before Putin, it was understood that Ukraine would not join NATO. Yes, back in the days of the USSR. The US National Security Report states Europe is in a mess, a headline by CNN. His latest claim, based on what appears to be a fictitious poll of 82% of Ukrainians, they want peace. 2 points, all Ukrainians want peace, so please stop your Wall Street hyperbole and stick to real facts. Each of those 10 statements were made by the President of the United States or on his behalf. Equally, they all benefit Vladimir Putin. 10 months ago in February, during remarks to a journalist at Mar-a-Lago, Trump said he supported Russia's demands for Ukraine to hold a presidential election. More recently, European Pravda, citing his interview with Politico, reports the US president believes Ukraine should hold presidential elections as long as a long time has passed since the previous vote. In response, President Zelensky said he is ready for presidential elections if international partners can ensure security during the vote. He also is prepared to support changes to the law on elections during martial law and is waiting for proposals from his parliament, that is the Ukrainian parliament and not the United States Senate. And also a comment and observation that the US president has become a victim of Russian disinformation. Further examples and lies and exaggeration. The US president said that he was uncomfortable saying it, as he should be, but the approval rating of the Ukrainian leader had supposedly fallen to 4%. He should be uncomfortable repeating Russian propaganda. Let's have a reality and honesty check for you. Based on recent, and we are talking recent, independent Ukrainian research, when he was elected to office in 2019, Zelensky's popularity was 59%. In 2022, at the start of the war, it was 84%. Today, almost 4 years later, 2/3 of Ukrainians, 67%, support Zelensky. So where the US president gets his 4% from, nobody knows. 1 week ago, by comparison, in the United States, the president's approval rating was 36%. That's according to Gallup poll. The latest Reuters IPOS polls found the president's overall approval had ticked up 3 points, so that makes him 41 points. Does that mean they're going to have elections in the United States? I doubt it. As only to be expected, the Kremlin welcomed both the remarks by the US president, particularly his claims about Russia's advantage on the battlefield, given the fact that they've lost 1.2 million men at war, plus almost 250,000 items of heavy-duty equipment, including aircraft, battleships, etc., submarines and what have you. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, and this was reported by the French international news agency AFP and also European Pravda. Peskov told journalists Trump's latest comments are very important and largely align with Russia's view. In many ways on the subject of NATO membership, on the subject of territories, on the subject of how Ukraine is losing, is in tune with our understanding. Isn't that a surprise? Moving on, he said. If the US is not attacking Zelensky, it's attacking Europe. In a recent series of tweets by the US president claiming Zelensky had not read his latest Russian peace plan and White House statements applauding the US national security strategy, a 33-page report telling Europe it's messed up, the same report forgets to ignore the mayor of New York's broadcast advising illegal immigrants how to avoid capture and deportation. The EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Kaja, rebukes and refutes and rejects, as only she can, the negative comments in the US National Security Strategy document, which delivers an overall criticism of Europe. Of course, this is possibly in response to Europe's criticism and rejection of the Trump peace plan, Part 1, which we all know was Russian. I offer a quote for you. The criticism made by the White House claimed European countries face civilization erasure, partly because they accept migrants, just like the United States. It accuses some European governments of unfairly censoring political parties, mostly from the right. So we see that this criticism is politically based and not factually based. In her response, Kallas said the decisions concerning the European Union are taken by the European Union for the European Union. In other words, mind your own business. These include decisions relating to our regulatory autonomy, the protection of freedom of expression, and the rules-based international order, which means we have rules to follow. We don't make it up as we go along or when we wake up in the morning and think something different. It means that we are coherent and we are judged by our actions and our words. At the same time, she acknowledged while her critical remarks from the US administration might have some basis, and one has to acknowledge that it's true, Europe should place greater trust in its own power, including its approach to Russia, and Europe should be more confident about its own strength, particularly in relations to Russia. In other words, don't impose your thinking on us. To put matters in perspective, the White House published a new US national security strategy, a document outlining foreign policy, security priorities for the United States. The document stresses that policy towards Europe should focus on restoring strategic stability in relations with Russia. Realize that Russia was part of Europe, but anyway, giving Europe greater responsibility for its own defence, which it accepts. Remember NATO? Preventing further NATO enlargement all points to a Russian briefing. True. Honesty check. While acknowledging there's truth in some of the criticisms, Europe should not play second fiddle to the US White House. Europe is closer to the threats from Russia and has the collective strength to challenge any political, economic or military threats which Russia may pose. The formal UK response, stated in the context of the publication of the updated National Security Strategy document, it values transatlantic relations but emphasised EU's leading role in making decisions concerning itself. When matters relate to the United States, Europe does not intervene. When Europe makes decisions relating to Europe, the United States should not intervene. Commenting on the publication, a EU spokesman highlighted the priority importance of ending Russia's war against Ukraine. Okay, that's it. And the significant attention devoted to developments in the Western Hemisphere, which are key to the security of the United States itself. We fully agree that Europe remains strategically and culturally important to the United States, and that transatlantic trade remains one of the pillars of the global economy and of America's prosperity. In recent years, the EU has intensified efforts to reduce its dependence on the United States in matters of defence. Another fact. We continue constructive cooperation, ensuring Europe's competitiveness. The transatlantic partnership is unique and, as always, allies are stronger together. As to expected, and not missing the opportunity, the Russian response was to confuse and drive a wedge between the US and its Western allies. The Kremlin reacted predictably and supported the provisions of the new US national security strategy. The Kremlin aligned Russian news agency Interfax, citing Dmitry Medvedev, former Russian president and deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council. Commenting on the strategy, he noted that it contains formulations against confrontation and in favour of dialogue and building good relations. On the one hand, it's good, but on the other hand, we know sometimes everything is written nicely and conceptually, but what they call deep states does things differently. So we need to follow very closely how this concept is implemented. The Kremlin spokesperson added, and noted the reference to deep state. He praised the document for its realistic assessment of many contemporary challenges. Although he remarked on these, the only political declarations and therefore the importance of the document should not be exaggerated. He said that to him it looks like an attempt to turn a large ship that has been moving by inertia. This he means he's referring to the Western allies, NATO, etc., and has finally decided to change course, which of course we know the Russian ship Putin is fixed on a solid route to impose its demands and expectations through war, black ops and propaganda. He continued, for the first time in many years, Washington is openly talking about the need to restore strategic stability in Eurasia and to improve relations with Russia. The third part of this week's pro-Russian propaganda from the US features Keith Kellogg, the US President's Special Envoy for Ukraine. He said that the deal to end the war in Ukraine is really close, and its conclusion is dependent on resolving two main outstanding issues: the future of Donbass and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Apologies to the friends and the advisors of General Kellogg. The reality to end the war is not close, and an alternative opinion, if you are listening, is: stop telling Ukraine what it can and cannot do. Stop imposing US objectives and thinking and listen to Ukraine. In Zelensky's own word, in response to the United States president, there are three visions. There is the US vision, there is the Russian vision, and there is a Ukrainian vision. We don't have a unified view on Donbass. He added that Kiev is insisting on separate security guarantees agreement with its Western allies, first and foremost the United States, which the United States is refusing to do. Let us not forget, the invader continues to invade, and there are more than two issues. Immediate ceasefire required, rejected by Russia. Recognition of the sovereign state of Ukraine and its original borders, rejected by Russia. Return of kidnapped children, who knows how many there are or where they are, Russia has not agreed. Return of all annexed and captured territories, including Crimea, Donbass, rejected by Russia. Security guarantees by all parties, US, NATO, EU and Russia, rejected by the US and Russia. Removal of veto conditions on EU and NATO memberships, imposed by US and Russia, and rejected by Hungary. Reparations, when and how. And finally, a small point but interesting is that following the recent meetings between Witkoff and Kushner with the Moscow elite, a little bit of propaganda said that Kushner's participation in Moscow talks proved very timely. His presence, Kushner's, added an element of consistency to the charm, friendliness of Special Envoy Witkoff. I personally believe that to a large extent, if a plan leading to, this is again the Russian speaking, a plan leading to settlement continues to take shape on paper, much of it will be the penmanship of Mr. Kushner. Now that puts Mr. Kushner in an interesting position. Is he negotiating for his father-in-law? Is he negotiating for Ukraine, or is he negotiating for the Russians? Rustem Umerov, Secretary of the National Security Defense Council and the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, they're scheduled to hold another meeting with Witkoff and Kushner in Miami. Watch this space. Flattery and propaganda are common bedfellows, and neither are to be believed or accepted. So from all of us at the centre in Kiev, thank you. Please share this podcast with your friends and those you think who will be interested. The online address is Russia Unmasked. We'll be back soon with more news from Kiev. Until then, Slav Ukraini. Ukrainians were, are and always will be here. Volodymyr Zelensky. Thank you.